We have an audience this evening of more than 100 people, but for easy math, let's call it 100. Across large US companies, for every 100 workers, how many would you estimate received a promotion last year? At the high end, it turns out it's 10 to 12%. So let's say anywhere from 10 to 12 of you got a promotion last year. Great, congratulations. But what happens if instead of getting promoted, you get demoted? That is the story I want to tell. When you get demoted, I get demoted. My own demotion. I got demoted, and I'm going to tell you that story. Actually, my demotion happened more than 2 decades ago, and yet, in my mind, the experience can still feel raw and immediate. I felt all the flavors of emotion that come with demotion. Sorrow, self-pity, resentment, bitterness. But in a moment of self-preservation, I was able to offset those emotions by pivoting. When I look back, I can see that my demotion was a small thing. It certainly wasn't life-threatening or bankrupting. But I had an entrenched sense of myself and my work. The demotion tore that up, and I did not know how I was going to put the pieces back together. So, what I did was, I allowed myself a period of uncertainty. I wasn't going to charge ahead in the same vein of work. I was in journalism. Perhaps I would resume that career in a year or so. But in the near term, I was going to apply myself to a problem I had complained about. If you get blindsided by something that disrupts your chosen path, and you give yourself permission to step off that path, even briefly, this alternate venture can leaf out into something authentic. Not going to say it always works out great, but it may result in value that you could not anticipate. In my case, it led me to establish a nonprofit agency that is now celebrating its 25th anniversary. My demotion story goes back to 1990. I was a newspaper reporter in my home state of Vermont, and I was striving to move away from writing news to focus on writing feature stories. I got my big break when I was hired for a feature position at a newspaper in Syracuse. I moved from Vermont to Syracuse. I wrote profiles of people, stories about arts, culture, recreation. So far, so good. But very soon, the newspaper reassigned me to cover news. Town and village government, schools, courts. I did this for 9 years before I finally worked my way back to a full-time feature writing position at the same newspaper. That was my holy grail. But the stories that I aspired to write did not really align with what the newspaper wanted, and my work was too labored for the pace of a daily newspaper. I can recognize these shortcomings now, but back then I didn't. A managing editor scheduled a meeting for me, took me off the feature job, told me the newspaper would reassign me to be a police reporter. I went home to my apartment that night. My girlfriend called. She said, "Hi, "How was your day?" I said, "Really, really bad." Instead of fighting this circumstance and remaining at the newspaper, I gave my notice of resignation and, with no long-range plan, decided I would temporarily focus on an issue I had complained about. As we cycle through our civic lives, we encounter disappointments, ranging from litter to other forms of eyesore to failures of social and civic service. We may traverse these problems repeatedly, and we may complain about them, often silently to ourselves, but we are usually at a loss to act. The problems belong to somebody else. I normally operate with that kind of slackness, silently complain about stuff and move along. But in this instance, I was motivated by a combination of my demotion and my complaint. Now you may be wondering, geez, why is this guy such a complainer? I'm going to tell you. At the newspaper, I had a rare opportunity to write an editorial, an opinion piece. So let's see, what shall I write about? I'm not an activist, I'm not a social reformer, but I have been really disappointed in the city's poster kiosks. Let me write about that. It was the late 1990s, and Syracuse had received a multi-million-dollar federal grant to renovate the downtown streetscape. New sidewalk benches, vintage lampposts, sidewalks interspersed with multicolored bricks, and poster kiosks or poster panels intended as advertising spots for downtown merchants. As a lover of art, including bold graphic art like you see in commercial signage, I had high hopes for these kiosks. Same as other upstate cities, Syracuse was trying to revive its downtown, and I looked forward to the kiosks playing a role in that effort. But that's not what happened. Merchants couldn't be persuaded to advertise in the kiosks. The kiosks fell into disuse, and they sent a downbeat message about our city. So I wrote my editorial complaining, why can't our city get its act together with the downtown poster kiosks? Editorial appeared, people read it, kiosks stayed the same, and that was that. A few months later, when I got demoted, this complaint was still ringing in my ears. So now I said to myself, I don't know what I'm going to be doing a year from now, but in the interim, let me try to do something about these kiosks that I have complained about. As it happened, Syracuse had two resources that could be piggybacked to address this problem. It had a weekly newspaper, the Syracuse New Times, which ran an annual poetry contest, the Seer Haikus Contest, inviting readers to write short poems, haiku, about the city. And at Syracuse University, there was an illustration professor and an illustration program. The professor, Roger DeMuth, who was well known for helping his students launch their careers. I introduced myself to Roger. I introduced myself to the downtown agency that controlled the kiosks. I proposed making posters for the kiosks by having people write short poems, haiku, about the city, and having those haiku illustrated by Roger's students. The Syracuse Poster Project issued its first poster series in 2002 and has gone on to work with artists throughout central New York. We are a small organization, but we accomplish a lot. We produce 10 to 15 unique posters each year. We disseminate our work by selling prints of the posters and other poster-based products. We put on an annual unveiling celebration. After a year, when the posters have retired from the kiosks, we try to renovate and reuse them in other public spaces. And we cultivate and develop other venues beyond the kiosks for the permanent installation of poster panels. Viewing the long work of the project, people may sometimes imagine it to be, in their words, a labor of love. No, it was a way of parking myself in a moment of personal desperation. As for my chances, the project's chances of success, I did have certain skills and advantages, but I was also inexperienced and naive. I thought the project could easily support itself on poster sales alone. I had no appreciation for marketing and promotion. I had never worked for a nonprofit, and I had never written a grant application. If I had been well versed in these realities, perhaps it would have prevented me from even trying. Instead, I learned along the way. Of course, not everything on the journey has been roses and sunny skies, but when things bring me down, there's usually something bright to turn my attention to. Giving our poets and artists opportunities to contribute to the character of their city, seeing our young interns develop skills and step out in their careers, experiencing our work on display around the city, and sensing that this matters to people. For those of you who rise in your careers through a series of promotions, I hope the authority and resources you acquire enable you to solve problems that need solving. When the alternative happens and life knocks us down a notch, we may naturally feel disappointed and unsure about how to move forward. If this happens to you, pause. Leave the future unresolved and think about working on something that's been bugging you. It may give you a fresh start, and it may lead to the next fulfilling thing. Thank you.